I was washing dishes when my 7-year-old son Tommy burst through our apartment door, his small body trembling like a leaf in a winter storm. His cheeks were bright red from the December cold, and his eyes held a confusion that broke my heart. "Daddy," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Auntie Sarah told me to wait outside while Jake and Emma opened their Christmas presents. The dish slipped from my hands, crashing into the sink. My blood turned to ice as I realized what had happened. My sister had deliberately excluded my child from the family celebration that I had helped fund with my own struggling paycheck. Without questioning Tommy further, I grabbed my keys and coat. We drove straight to Sarah's house, where the family Christmas party was still in full swing. I walked through that front door like a man possessed, and without a second thought, I started removing every single expensive item I had bought for her family over the past year. The ride to Sarah's house gave me just enough time to piece together the full horror of what my son had endured. Tommy sat in his booster seat, still shaking, and through gentle questioning, I learned he had stood outside in 20-degree weather for over 2 hours. I could see Jake and Emma through the window. "Daddy," he said, his small voice cracking. They were opening the Nintendo Switch and the iPad, the ones you bought them for being good at school. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as rage built in my chest like a pressure cooker ready to explode. Those gifts represented months of sacrifice on my part. Working double shifts at the warehouse, skipping lunches, choosing generic cereal over name brands. Every dollar I had scraped together was motivated by love for my nephew and niece, especially after their father Mark had lost his construction job 8 months ago. "Did Aunt Sarah say why you had to wait outside, buddy?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady for Tommy's sake. "She said I needed to learn patience," Tommy replied, repeating words that were clearly not his own. "And that maybe you spoil me too much, so I should watch how lucky Jake and Emma are." The cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. My sister had not just excluded my child from a family gathering, she had turned it into some twisted lesson about gratitude, while my son watched through frosted windows as cousins enjoyed gifts I had purchased. When we pulled into Sarah's driveway, I could see the warm glow of Christmas lights through her living room windows. The sounds of laughter and holiday music drifted across the snow-covered lawn. Cars were parked everywhere: my parents' burgundy Buick, Uncle Robert's white pickup truck, my cousin Ashley's red sedan. The whole family was there celebrating, while my son had been left in the cold like an unwanted stray dog. I called Sarah from the car, my phone shaking in my grip. "Oh, Darwin," she answered with that casual tone that made my skin crawl. "Did you come to pick up Tommy? I hope he learned something today about being grateful." "You left my 7-year-old son outside in freezing weather for 2 hours. I said, my voice dangerously low. "Oh, please don't be so dramatic. It wasn't that long, and he needed to understand that Christmas isn't about getting things. Maybe if you didn't spoil him so much, he would appreciate what he has." The line went quiet as Sarah's words sank in. This woman, whose family I had been supporting financially, was lecturing me about spoiling my child, while her own kids enjoyed the fruits of my labor. "Sarah, I want you to explain to me right now why my son was excluded from opening presents that I paid for." "Look, Darwin, I don't have time for your drama. Maybe you should focus on teaching Tommy some patience instead of always trying to buy his love." The phone clicked dead. My sister had hung up on me. But her dismissive cruelty had given me clarity. This was not an oversight or a misunderstanding. This was deliberate, calculated exclusion designed to humiliate my child while rewarding her own. As I sat in that driveway, I remembered something that made my blood boil even hotter. 3 years ago, when my wife Lisa died in that car accident, I had thrown myself into being the perfect family member. Grief had made me desperate to belong somewhere, to feel useful and loved. I had become the family's emergency fund, the uncle who showed up with gifts and groceries and gas money whenever needed. I thought I was honoring Lisa's memory by taking care of everyone she loved. But sitting in that car, watching my son's confused face in the rearview mirror, I realized I had been enabling something much darker. My generosity had become expected, then exploited, and finally taken for granted, to the point where the beneficiaries felt entitled to humiliate my child. My neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, had tried to warn me just last week. "Darwin, honey," she had said while we shoveled our walkways, "I heard your sister at the grocery store telling people you couldn't afford nice Christmases anymore. Said you were becoming a burden on the family." I had dismissed it as gossip, but now those words hit me like a sledgehammer. Sarah had been accepting my gifts while bad-mouthing me to our community. She had been planning to phase me out of family gatherings while still expecting my financial support. The realization that my sister had been playing a long game of manipulation while my son and I struggled to survive was the final straw. Walking up to Sarah's front door felt like approaching a battlefield where I was finally ready to fight back. The December air bit at my face, but it was nothing compared to the fire burning in my chest. Tommy's small hand was warm in mine, and I could feel his body still trembling from more than just the cold. The house looked perfect from the outside. Sarah had always been good at maintaining appearances. Twinkling lights outlined every window, an expensive wreath hung on the door, and fresh garland wrapped around the porch pillars. All decorations I had helped pay for during her financial emergency in November. I opened the front door without knocking. The sounds of family celebration hit me immediately. Christmas music playing from the expensive sound system I had bought them last year, children's laughter echoing from the living room, and the warm buzz of adult conversation over coffee and eggnog. The living room was a scene of perfect holiday bliss. Torn wrapping paper covered the hardwood floors like colorful snow. Jake and Emma sat surrounded by an enormous pile of new toys, electronic tablets, designer clothes, expensive board games, art supplies that cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. The adults lounged on the sectional sofa I had helped Sarah buy when Mark lost his job, drinking from crystal glasses and sharing plates of homemade cookies. Every eye in the room turned toward me as I stood in the doorway with Tommy. The conversation stopped mid-sentence, creating an awkward silence that felt thick enough to cut with a knife. Darwin. My mother, Patricia, jumped up from her chair, her face flushing with what might have been embarrassment or annoyance. "We weren't expecting you. Is everything all right?" Sarah appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a festive apron. Her expression shifted from surprise to irritation when she saw me. "How dare you just barge into my house without knocking? We're in the middle of a family celebration." "I'm here to collect what belongs to me," I said, my voice calm but carrying an edge that made everyone in the room go quiet. I walked over to the 75-inch Samsung television mounted on the wall, the centerpiece of their entertainment setup. My fingers found the power cord behind the entertainment center, and I yanked it from the wall socket. The screen went black, cutting off the holiday movie that had been playing in the background. "What are you doing?" Sarah shrieked, her voice hitting a pitch that made the children cover their ears. "You can't just take my television." "This television cost me $2,300, I replied, reaching behind the unit to disconnect the HDMI cables. "I bought it for you last Black Friday when you said Mark needed something to cheer him up after losing his job." Jake and Emma started crying as I unplugged the Nintendo Switch they had been playing with. Their game characters froze mid-jump, controllers falling from their small hands as they realized their entertainment was being taken away. "Uncle Darwin, no," Jake wailed, reaching for the gaming console. We were about to beat the final boss. My heart broke for the children, but I could not let their tears stop me from protecting my own son. "I'm not taking anything from you kids," I told them gently. "I'm taking back what I gave to your parents. They chose to make me take it back." Sarah's face turned purple with rage. "You cannot just steal from my children. I'm calling the police." "Please do," I said, pulling out my phone to show the screen full of purchase receipts I had saved in my email. "I have documentation for every item I bought for this family. Serial numbers, credit card statements, text messages where you begged me to help with these exact purchases." My father, Frank, stood up from his recliner, his face grave with concern. "Son, let's discuss this like reasonable adults. This is Christmas Day, for crying out loud." "You're right, Dad," I replied carefully, wrapping the television's power cord around my arm. This is Christmas Day, the day my 7-year-old son stood outside in the freezing cold for 2 hours while his cousins enjoyed presents I bought them. Uncle Robert, Sarah's husband's brother, moved to block the front door. He was a big man who worked construction when jobs were available, and his presence was meant to intimidate. "You need to put that stuff down, Darwin. We can work this out without you acting like a crazy person." "I'm not acting crazy." "Robert," I said, meeting his eyes with steady determination, "I'm acting like a father whose child was deliberately mistreated by people I trusted. Now move away from the door or I'll move you myself." The tension in the room was thick enough to suffocate on. My cousin Ashley had her phone out, probably recording everything for social media. She was Sarah's closest ally in the family, always ready to document drama for her followers. "I'm putting this on TikTok," Ashley announced, holding up her phone. "Everyone needs to see how Darwin completely lost his mind on Christmas Day." "Go ahead," I told her, picking up the iPad I had bought for Emma's birthday. "Make sure you include the part where a 7-year-old child was forced to stand outside in 20-degree weather while adults ate holiday dinner inside." That was when I noticed something that made my blood run even colder. The iPad screen was still open to the messaging app, and I could see a conversation between Sarah and Mark that made my stomach drop to the floor. "Darwin is such a sucker," one message read. "We should milk him for everything we can get before Christmas, then cut him off. I'm tired of pretending to be grateful." Another message from Mark replied, "Just keep playing the poor struggling family card. He falls for it every time. Once we get through the holidays, we can tell everyone he's becoming unstable since Lisa died." The room fell completely silent as I read these messages aloud, my voice growing stronger with each devastating word. Every face in the room reflected different levels of shock, embarrassment, and growing understanding of what had really been happening. The silence that followed my reading of those text messages was deafening. You could have heard a snowflake hit the ground outside. Every adult in that room was processing the ugly truth that had just been exposed, and the children sensed something terrible had happened even if they could not understand the words. Sarah's face went through a series of expressions: shock, panic, anger, and finally desperate calculation. "You had no right to read my private messages," she said, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. "Private messages where you and your husband plan to financially abuse a grieving widower." I asked, scrolling through more of their conversation history. "Let's see what else we have here." Mark tried to grab my arm, but I easily sidestepped him. My years of warehouse work had kept me strong, while his months of unemployment had left him soft around the edges. "Give me that iPad, Darwin. That's my personal property." "Actually, it's my personal property," I corrected, pulling up the purchase receipt from my email. "Bought and paid for by me for Emma's 8th birthday in September, when you texted me that she needed something for her schoolwork." I continued reading from their messages, each revelation more damaging than the last. Here's a good one. "Darwin called today, asking if we need anything for Thanksgiving dinner. I told him we were short on everything. He's bringing a 20-pound turkey, sides, and dessert. Mark and I are going to tell my parents we paid for it all." My mother, Patricia, gasped, her hand flying to cover her mouth. "Sarah, you told us you had saved money for that dinner." "And here?" I continued, my voice getting stronger as righteous anger fueled me. Sarah writes, "I think Darwin is getting suspicious about how much we ask for. Maybe we should start calling him needy instead. Make it look like he's the one who can't let go." Uncle Robert stepped back from the door, his face showing disgust rather than support for Sarah. "That's messed up, Sarah. Really messed up." But the worst was yet to come. As I scrolled further back in their conversation history, I found messages that made my hands shake with pure rage. "Mark, I think we should start limiting Tommy's time at family events," Sarah had written 2 weeks ago. "The kid is weird and clingy just like his father. Plus, it will make Darwin more desperate to buy our approval." Mark had replied, "Good idea. We can make it look like we're doing Darwin a favor by teaching his kids some independence." The room erupted as everyone began talking at once. My father was demanding explanations from Sarah. My mother was crying, and Uncle Robert was shaking his head in disbelief. Ashley had stopped recording and was staring at her phone screen with obvious discomfort. But Tommy's small voice cut through all the adult chaos. "Daddy Jake told me something when I was outside." Every adult in the room went quiet again, turning to look at my son with sudden attention. "What did Jake tell you, buddy?" I asked, kneeling down to meet his eyes. "He said his daddy told him that Uncle Darwin is stupid and they're getting rich off of him," Tommy said in his innocent 7-year-old voice. "Jake said they laugh about it at dinner sometimes." The words hit the room like a physical explosion. Even the children could understand the cruelty of what had been happening, and Jake's face turned red with shame as he realized he had exposed his parents' secret. "Jake," Sarah snapped at her son, "you weren't supposed to tell anyone that—" The admission that she had been teaching her children to mock their uncle while accepting his generosity was the final straw for several family members. My father, Frank, who had been trying to mediate, finally lost his patience. "Sarah Elizabeth Morrison," he said, using her full name in the voice that had terrified us as children. "What kind of person teaches their children to laugh at family members who help them?" "A person who has been running a con game on her own brother," I answered, standing back up with the iPad still in my hands. "A person who has been using my grief over Lisa's death to manipulate money out of me while planning to cut me off as soon as she didn't need me anymore." Patricia was crying openly now, her holiday makeup running down her cheeks in black streaks. "How could you do this? Sarah Darwin has been nothing but generous to this family." "Generous?" Sarah laughed bitterly, her mask finally dropping completely. "He's been pathetic. Following us around like a lost puppy, throwing money at everyone, trying to buy his way back into feeling normal after Lisa died. We were doing him a favor by accepting his charity." The cruelty in her voice was so naked, so calculating that even Ashley winced. Uncle Robert moved further away from the door, clearly no longer interested in blocking my exit. But I was not done. I pulled out my phone and started calculating numbers out loud, adding up every purchase I could remember making for Sarah's family over the past year. "Let's see," I said, pulling up bank statements on my phone. 75-inch television, $2,300. Nintendo Switch and games, $650. iPad for Emma, $420. School clothes for both kids in August, $380. Emergency car repair in October, $890. As I continued listing purchases, the dollar amounts grew higher and higher. Mark's face grew paler with each number. Appliances when your refrigerator broke, $1,200. Furniture for Jake's room, $750. Groceries every month when you're short, approximately $200 per month, times 12 months equals $2,400. The final total made everyone in the room go quiet, $15,700 in 1 year. $15,700. I repeated, letting the number sink in. That's more than Mark made in his entire last year of employment. You've been living off my grief while I ate ramen noodles for dinner and wore shoes with holes in them. But the real devastating blow was yet to come. As I continued scrolling through their messages, I found evidence that their scheme went far beyond just taking advantage of me. "Look at this," I said, reading from a message chain between Sarah and someone named Jennifer from their church. "Sarah is telling the church community that Mark is still unemployed and they need help with Christmas gifts for the children. She's been collecting donations from the congregation while Mark has been working full-time at the lumberyard for 3 months. Uncle Robert's face went from disgusted to angry. "Sarah, is that true? Has Mark been working this whole time?" Mark finally spoke up, his voice barely audible. "I got hired at Peterson Lumber in September. Full-time with benefits." The admission hit the room like a bomb. Sarah had not only been manipulating me, but had been running a much larger scam involving their church extended family and community. She had been collecting unemployment benefits fraudulently, while Mark worked under the table taking charity from generous people who thought they were helping a struggling family. "So, not only have you been stealing from me," I said, my voice deadly calm, "you've been stealing from everyone who cares about you. The church grandma Helen who sends you $50 every month, even the neighbors who brought you groceries during your hard times." Ashley finally found her voice. "Sarah, this is so much worse than I thought. You need to tell everyone the truth and pay the money back." "Pay it back with what?" Sarah screamed, her composure completely shattered. "We don't have that kind of money." "You have a house full of things I bought," I replied. "We can start there." The moment I suggested taking back everything I had purchased, the room exploded into chaos. Sarah began screaming at the top of her lungs. Mark started pacing like a caged animal, and the children were crying in confusion and fear. But I had reached a point of cold, calculated determination that nothing could shake. I pulled out my phone and started calling the police. "What are you doing?" Mark demanded, lunging for my phone. "I'm calling the authorities," I said calmly, stepping away from his grasp. "Fraud is a felony in this state. Theft by deception, unemployment fraud, and accepting charity under false pretenses are all crimes that carry serious penalties." Sarah's face went white as the reality of her situation began to sink in. "You wouldn't really have your own sister arrested on Christmas Day." "Watch me," I replied as the emergency dispatcher answered. 911, what's your emergency?" "I need to report multiple counts of fraud and theft by deception," I said clearly. "I have documentation and witnesses." While I was on the phone with the dispatcher, something beautiful began happening in that living room. The fog of manipulation and enabling that had allowed Sarah's behavior to continue for so long finally began to clear. My mother, Patricia, stood up straighter and looked at Sarah with new eyes. "What you did to Tommy today was evil, Sarah. I don't care if you're my daughter. Making a 7-year-old child stand outside in the cold while you celebrated with his gifts is unforgivable." Uncle Robert, who had been Sarah's biggest enabler, after her husband, shook his head in disgust. "I can't believe I helped you with this. When you asked me to talk to Darwin about backing off from the family, I thought you were trying to help him process his grief. I had no idea you were planning to cut him off while keeping his money." Ashley deleted the video she had been recording and looked at Sarah with obvious disappointment. "I'm not posting this anywhere. This is too disgusting to share with the world." But the most unexpected ally came from my father, Frank, who had spent years trying to keep peace in the family by overlooking problems rather than addressing them. "Sarah," he said in a voice I had never heard from him before, "your mother and I have been supporting your manipulative behavior for too long. We enabled this because we wanted to avoid conflict, but look what our silence has created. We failed Darwin, and we failed Tommy." The police arrived faster than I expected. 2 officers, Detective Williams and Officer Martinez, took statements from everyone present. What had started as a family drama quickly became a criminal investigation as the evidence mounted. "Mr. Morrison," Detective Williams said to me after reviewing the text messages and financial documentation, "you have grounds for pressing charges on multiple felonies. Fraud, theft by deception, conspiracy to commit fraud, and unemployment fraud are all serious crimes." Sarah tried one more desperate manipulation. "Officer, please. Think about my children. It's Christmas Day. My brother is having a mental breakdown since his wife died. He's not thinking clearly." But Tommy chose that moment to speak up with the clear, honest voice that only children possess. "The police lady," he said to Officer Martinez, "my Aunt Sarah told me I had to wait outside because Uncle Darwin is stupid and gives too much money. She said I needed to learn that I don't deserve Christmas presents because my daddy is pathetic." The silence that followed my 7-year-old son's testimony was absolute. Even Sarah could not find words to defend herself against the innocent honesty of a child. Detective Williams looked at Sarah with the cold professionalism of someone who had seen too many cases of family abuse. "Ma'am, We're going to need you and your husband to come with us for questioning. We also need to contact social services regarding the children's welfare." "Social services," Sarah shrieked. "You can't take my children." "Ma'am, when children are exposed to ongoing criminal behavior and psychological manipulation, we're required to ensure their safety," Officer Martinez explained. "This is standard procedure in fraud cases involving families." As the reality of consequences began hitting her, Sarah's desperation reached new levels. She turned to each family member looking for someone to intervene on her behalf. "Mom, you can't let them arrest me. Tell them this is just a family misunderstanding." Patricia looked at her daughter with tears in her eyes but steel in her voice. "I love you, Sarah, but I cannot save you from the consequences of your own choices. What you did was wrong, and you need to face the results. Robert, you know Mark needs this job. If he gets arrested, we'll lose everything." Uncle Robert crossed his arms and stepped back. "You should have thought about that before you decided to run scams on people who trusted you." Finally, Sarah turned to me with what I can only describe as calculated desperation. "Darwin, please. I'm sorry. Okay, I'll pay everything back. Just don't press charges. Think about Jake and Emma." "I am thinking about Jake and Emma," I replied. "I'm thinking about how growing up with parents who teach them that manipulating family members is acceptable will damage them for life. I'm thinking about how watching their parents face consequences for their actions might be the best lesson they ever learn." But the moment that truly broke Sarah's world came when Detective Williams made a phone call that revealed the full scope of her criminal behavior. "Mrs. Morrison," he said after hanging up, "we've been in contact with the unemployment office and your husband's employer. Mr. Morrison has been working full-time for Peterson Lumber since September while collecting unemployment benefits. This constitutes unemployment fraud, which carries a penalty of up to 5 years in prison and $60,000 in fines." Mark's legs gave out and he collapsed into a chair. "I never wanted to do this. Sarah convinced me we needed the extra money to catch up on bills. It's also come to our attention that you've been accepting charitable donations from your church congregation under false pretenses," Officer Martinez added. "Pastor Michael contacted us after hearing about today's incident. Apparently, several community members witnessed the disturbance and called him with concerns." The domino effect of Sarah's lies was finally catching up with her, and there was nowhere left to run. But the final, most devastating revelation came from an unexpected source. My 78-year-old grandmother, Helen, arrived at the house having been called by a concerned neighbor who saw police cars in the driveway. "What in God's name is happening here?" she demanded, walking into the chaos with the authority that only grandmothers possess. When the situation was explained to her, Grandma Helen's face went through a transformation that was terrible to watch. This woman who had been sending Sarah $50 every month, who had been planning to leave her house to Sarah in her will, who had been so proud of her granddaughter's strength during hard times, realized she had been played for a fool. "Sarah Ann Morrison," she said in a voice that could freeze blood. "I have been planning to update my will to leave everything to you because I thought you were struggling to make ends meet. I was going to announce it at Christmas dinner tomorrow." Sarah's face lit up with hope. "Grandma, that's wonderful news." "Was wonderful news," Grandma Helen corrected. "After what I've witnessed here today, I'm driving straight to my lawyer's office on Monday morning. Everything goes into trust funds for the grandchildren instead. You won't see a penny of my estate, and neither will Mark." The final destruction of Sarah's financial safety net was complete. In one day, she had lost her brother's support, her extended family's trust, her community's sympathy, her fraudulent income streams, and her inheritance. The walls of manipulation she had built around herself had crumbled completely. As the police prepared to take Sarah and Mark into custody, I felt something I had not experienced since Lisa died. The peace that comes from standing up for what is right, regardless of the cost. The aftermath of the arrest moved with surprising speed. Within hours, Detective Williams had contacted multiple agencies, and what started as a family confrontation had become a multi-jurisdictional investigation into fraud conspiracy and abuse of charitable systems. Sarah and Mark were taken to the county jail for booking and initial questioning. The children Jake and Emma were placed in temporary custody with my parents, Patricia and Frank, while social services conducted their investigation. Watching those two innocent kids pack overnight bags while their parents were led away in handcuffs was heartbreaking, but I knew it was necessary for their long-term well-being. "Uncle Darwin," Emma said to me as she clutched her favorite stuffed animal, "are Mommy and Daddy coming home soon?" I knelt down to her level, choosing my words carefully. "Your parents made some very bad choices, sweetheart. They're going to have to face the consequences of those choices so they can learn to make better ones. But you and Jake are safe, and everyone who loves you is going to take care of you." "Did we do something wrong?" Jake asked, his 8-year-old face scrunched with confusion and guilt. "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "Children are never responsible for their parents' mistakes. You two are good kids who deserve love and honesty from the adults in your life." Tommy surprised everyone by walking over to his cousins and hugging them both. "It's scary when grown-ups yell," he said with the wisdom of a child who had experienced too much adult drama. "But Uncle Darwin tells the truth, and truth makes everything better even when it hurts first." The community response to the news was swift and overwhelming. Pastor Michael arrived at the house within 2 hours of learning about the situation, not to defend Sarah, but to apologize to our family and offer support. "Darwin," he said, his face heavy with regret, "our congregation has been donating food, clothing, and money to Sarah's family for months based on her claims of unemployment and financial hardship. We feel terrible that our charity was misdirected while your family was actually struggling." "Pastor, you and your congregation acted from pure hearts," I assured him. "Sarah manipulated good people who wanted to help. That's on her, not on you." Nevertheless, Pastor Michael continued, "Our church community wants to establish a fund to help with Tommy's expenses while you recover from this financial abuse. We also want to ensure that Jake and Emma have emotional support during this difficult transition." The unexpected kindness from people who owed us nothing was overwhelming. Mrs. Peterson from next door brought over a casserole and stayed to help Patricia manage the children. Other neighbors who had witnessed Tommy standing outside in the cold arrived with groceries, warm clothes, and offers to help however they could. But the most significant support came from an unexpected source, my cousin Ashley, who had been Sarah's closest ally and biggest enabler. "Darwin," she said, pulling me aside while the children played in the other room, "I owe you the biggest apology of my life. I've been supporting Sarah's behavior for years because I thought she was just dramatic and high maintenance. I never realized she was running actual criminal schemes." Ashley went on to reveal information that expanded the scope of Sarah's fraud even further. She's been borrowing money from Grandma Helen, telling her that Mark's unemployment was about to run out and they might lose the house. Grandma has given her over $3,000 in the past 6 months. She also convinced our cousin Beth in California to send money for the children's school clothes, claiming you couldn't afford to help anymore because of your own financial problems. Each revelation painted a clearer picture of Sarah's systematic manipulation of every person who cared about her family. She had not just targeted me, she had created an entire network of lies designed to extract money and sympathy from multiple sources simultaneously. The legal consequences began falling into place with surprising efficiency. Detective Williams called me that evening to explain the charges being filed. "Mr. Morrison, your sister and her husband are facing multiple felony charges. Unemployment fraud, theft by deception, conspiracy to commit fraud, and welfare fraud. The total amount of money they illegally obtained exceeds $20,000, which elevates several charges to felony level." "What kind of sentences are we looking at?" I asked. "If convicted on all charges, your sister could face up to 7 years in prison and substantial fines. Her husband, because he cooperated with investigators and seems to have been pressured into the unemployment fraud, will likely receive a reduced sentence with probation and community service." "What about restitution?" "Full restitution will be ordered plus court costs and penalties. The court can garnish wages, seize assets, and put liens on property to ensure payment." The financial recovery process began immediately. An insurance investigator arrived the next day to examine claims Sarah had filed for various household emergencies that turned out to be fraudulent. The unemployment office froze her benefits and began recovery proceedings. The church pastoral council met to discuss how to reclaim donations that had been given under false pretenses. But perhaps the most satisfying development was watching my extended family begin to process their own roles in enabling Sarah's behavior. Uncle Robert approached me with genuine remorse. "Darwin, I need to apologize for blocking that door and treating you like you were the problem. Sarah had convinced me that you were becoming obsessive about the family since Lisa died, and she needed help setting boundaries. I see now that she was manipulating me to isolate you. My mother, Patricia, was even more direct. Son, your father and I failed you terribly. We've been so focused on keeping peace in the family that we ignored clear signs of manipulation and abuse. We taught Sarah that there would never be real consequences for her behavior, and we taught you that your feelings and experiences didn't matter as much as family harmony." The conversation with my parents was long overdue and emotionally difficult, but it led to the most honest communication we had shared since Lisa's death. When Lisa died, my father Frank said, his voice heavy with regret, "We watched you throw yourself into taking care of everyone else as a way to avoid processing your grief. Instead of getting you professional help or encouraging healthy grieving, we let you become the family's emotional and financial caretaker because it was convenient for us. We failed as parents." Patricia added, tears flowing freely. "We should have protected you from being exploited when you were most vulnerable. Instead, we benefited from your generosity while turning a blind eye to how it was being abused." The admission that my parents had been passively complicit in my exploitation was painful to hear, but it opened the door for genuine healing and changed relationships. Meanwhile, the children were adjusting to their new temporary living situation with surprising resilience. Jake and Emma seemed almost relieved to be in a home where adults told the truth and followed through on their words. Tommy thrived having cousins around who were no longer being taught to see him as inferior or unworthy. Grandpa Frank. I heard Jake say one evening, "Why did Mommy and Daddy lie about Uncle Darwin? He's really nice, and he brings good snacks." My father's response was honest, but age-appropriate. "Sometimes adults make very bad choices when they're scared or want things they can't afford. Your parents chose lying and stealing instead of asking for help the right way. That's why they're in trouble now." The most unexpected development came when Detective Williams called to inform me that Sarah's cellmate had reported some disturbing conversations. "Mr. Morrison, your sister, has been bragging to other inmates about having backup plans and getting revenge on her family. We've discovered she had been researching how to claim that you were mentally unstable due to grief and gain guardianship of your son." The blood in my veins turned to ice water. "What do you mean, guardianship of Tommy?" "She was planning to petition the court for custody, claiming you were having a mental health crisis and couldn't properly care for your child. If successful, she would have gained access to Tommy's Social Security survivor benefits from your wife's death. That's approximately $800 per month until he turns 18. The revelation that Sarah had been planning to steal my son while stealing his inheritance was the final piece of evidence that this was not just financial fraud, but a calculated attack on everything I held dear. But it also gave me the clarity I needed to move forward without guilt or second-guessing. Sarah had not just manipulated money from a grieving widower. She had been planning to destroy what remained of my family for financial gain. The investigation revealed the full scope of her scheme: approximately $22,000 in fraudulent gains, not including the value of gifts and services she had received under false pretenses. The restitution order, combined with criminal penalties, would follow her for years to come. As I tucked Tommy into bed that night, he asked me a question that showed his remarkable emotional intelligence. "Daddy, are you sad that Aunt Sarah is in trouble?" I thought carefully before answering. "I'm sad that she made choices that hurt people, buddy. I'm sad for Jake and Emma because their parents' bad decisions are affecting them. But I'm not sad that the lying and stealing has stopped. Sometimes people need consequences to learn how to make better choices. Like when you give me a timeout for hitting..." Exactly like that, son. Sometimes adults need much bigger timeouts to learn much bigger lessons. The peace I felt that night was unlike anything I had experienced since Lisa's death. For the first time in 3 years, I was not carrying the weight of other people's problems or trying to buy my way into feeling worthy of love. 6 months after that Christmas Day confrontation, the legal and emotional aftermath had settled into a new reality that none of us could have anticipated. Sarah had been sentenced to 18 months in county jail, followed by 3 years of probation, while Mark received 12 months of probation and 600 hours of community service. The restitution order totaled $22,400 to be paid through garnished wages and seizure of assets. The children, Jake and Emma, had been through court-mandated counseling and were thriving in Ashley's care. My cousin had stepped up in ways that surprised everyone, petitioning for temporary custody and creating a stable, honest home environment for them. The transformation in both children was remarkable to watch. Uncle Darwin. Emma said during one of our weekly family dinners, "Ashley tells us the truth about everything even when it's sad. It feels better than when Mommy used to make up stories." Jake had struggled more with anger and confusion about his parents' choices, but he was working through it with the help of a child psychologist. "I used to think lying was okay if it got you what you wanted," he admitted to me one afternoon. "But now I see how much it hurts everyone, especially the people who love you." Tommy had grown stronger and more confident through the experience. Watching the adults in his life finally stand up for truth and justice had given him a sense of security he had never had before. He was doing better in school, had made close friends, and spoke with the clear voice of a child who knew he was valued and protected. "Daddy," he said one evening as we worked on his homework together, "I'm glad you took back those things from Aunt Sarah. It showed me that you think I'm worth protecting." The simple honesty of his statement brought tears to my eyes. My son had needed to see that his father would fight for him, even when it meant confronting powerful family dynamics and accepting painful consequences. My relationship with my parents had undergone a complete transformation. Patricia and Frank had committed to family counseling both individually and with me to address the enabling patterns that had allowed Sarah's abuse to flourish for years. We realize now that our desire to avoid conflict actually created a more dangerous situation. My mother explained during one of our sessions. By never holding Sarah accountable for smaller manipulations, we taught her that she could get away with bigger ones. My father had been even more direct in taking responsibility. I taught my children that keeping peace was more important than standing up for what's right. That's why Sarah felt entitled to abuse people's generosity, and it's why you felt like you had to accept mistreatment to belong in this family. The counseling sessions were difficult but necessary. We had to examine decades of family dynamics where Sarah's dramatic needs had always taken priority over everyone else's well-being. I learned that my grief-driven generosity had been exploited, but I also learned that setting boundaries did not make me selfish or unloving. Uncle Robert had become one of my strongest allies, working to repair our relationship with genuine effort. "Darwin, I spent years thinking you were too sensitive about Sarah's behavior. I see now that you were the only one brave enough to call out what was really happening. I should have listened instead of defending her." The community response continued to overwhelm me with its generosity and support. Pastor Michael's congregation had indeed established a fund that helped with Tommy's school expenses and extracurricular activities. Local businesses, learning about the situation through word of mouth, offered everything from free car repairs to discounted groceries. But perhaps the most meaningful support came from other families who had experienced similar manipulations. "You'd be surprised how common this is," Detective Williams told me during one of our follow-up meetings. Financial abuse within families affects thousands of people every year. Most victims never report it because they feel guilty about pressing charges against relatives. He connected me with a support group for family fraud victims, where I met other people who had been exploited by relatives during vulnerable periods of their lives. Sharing stories and coping strategies with these individuals helped me understand that I was not alone, and that my experience, while painful, could help others recognize and escape similar situations. I began speaking at community meetings about financial fraud awareness, sharing my story to help others identify warning signs of manipulation. The response was overwhelming, with many people approaching me afterward to share their own experiences with exploitative family members. Your willingness to speak up gave me the courage to confront my sister about the money she's been taking from our elderly mother, one woman told me after a presentation. I thought I was the only one dealing with this kind of family betrayal. The financial recovery had been substantial. Through restitution payments, asset seizure, and insurance fraud recovery, I had received back approximately $16,000 of the money Sarah had stolen. More importantly, my monthly budget was no longer strained by constant emergency requests for help. Tommy and I had moved to a better apartment in a safer neighborhood, using some of the recovered funds as a security deposit. For the first time since Lisa's death, I was able to save money for emergencies and plan for Tommy's future education. But the most significant change was in my personal life. Through the church community that had supported us during the crisis, I had met Jennifer, a kindergarten teacher who had shown remarkable kindness to Tommy during his most difficult adjustment period. I've never seen a father fight so hard to protect his child while still maintaining his integrity, she told me during our first official date. The way you handled that situation with your sister showed me exactly what kind of man you are. Jennifer's patient understanding of Tommy's needs and her genuine affection for him had created the foundation for a healthy relationship built on honesty and mutual respect. Tommy had begun calling her almost Mom Jennifer, and their bond was growing naturally without pressure or expectation. Jennifer doesn't pretend things are perfect when they're not, Tommy observed with his characteristic directness. She tells me when she's sad or worried, but she doesn't make me fix her feelings like Aunt Sarah used to do. The contrast between Jennifer's emotional honesty and Sarah's manipulation was stark and healing for both Tommy and me. Meanwhile, Sarah's time in jail had reportedly been a difficult adjustment. According to her court-appointed counselor, she was slowly beginning to acknowledge the damage her choices had caused, though she still struggled with taking full responsibility. Your sister has been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, the counselor informed me during a victim impact session. This doesn't excuse her behavior, but it helps explain her inability to empathize with others and her tendency to view relationships as transactions. The diagnosis provided context, but not absolution. Sarah would need years of intensive therapy to develop healthier relationship patterns, and there was no guarantee she would succeed. Her supervised visits with Jake and Emma had been sporadic and difficult. The children, now accustomed to honest communication and stable relationships, found their mother's continued attempts at manipulation exhausting. "Mommy keeps asking us to tell Ashley that we want to come home," Jake reported after one visit. "But we told her we like living where people tell the truth." The children's clear preference for stability over manipulation was perhaps the most powerful indicator that breaking the cycle of abuse had been the right choice, despite its painful consequences. As for Mark, he had thrown himself into rehabilitation with genuine remorse. His community service involved working with homeless shelters, and the experience had given him perspective on his former life of fraudulent complaints and entitled demands. I spent so much energy resenting people who had more than me that I never focused on being grateful for what I had, he admitted during a mediated conversation aimed at family healing. Sarah convinced me that taking from Darwin was justified because he had insurance money from Lisa's death, but I see now how sick that thinking was. Mark's transformation seemed more genuine than Sarah's, and his cooperation with authorities had prevented more serious charges. He was working steadily, paying child support to Ashley for Jake and Emma's care, and contributing to the restitution payments. But perhaps the most meaningful development was watching Tommy grow into a confident, compassionate child who understood the difference between love and manipulation. "Daddy," he said one evening as we prepared dinner together, "I'm glad Aunt Sarah went to jail because now I know that adults have to follow rules too." His simple statement encapsulated one of the most important lessons of our ordeal, that justice and accountability make relationships safer and more genuine for everyone involved. The approaching first anniversary of that Christmas Day confrontation brought mixed emotions. Part of me grieved for the family relationships that had been damaged, but a larger part felt grateful for the toxic patterns that had been broken. Tommy was thriving in school. I had developed genuine friendships within our community, and Jennifer had become an integral part of our small family. The foundation we were building was based on honesty, mutual respect, and healthy boundaries rather than obligation, guilt, or financial transaction. 1 year later, I stood in the kitchen of our new apartment watching Tommy help Jennifer frost cupcakes for his upcoming 9th birthday party. The contrast between this peaceful domestic scene and the chaos of that Christmas Day confrontation felt almost surreal. Everything about our lives had changed, and every single change had been for the better. Sarah had been released from jail 2 months ago and was living in a halfway house while completing her probation requirements. Her court-mandated therapy had produced what appeared to be genuine progress, though rebuilding trust would be a long process measured in years rather than months. "Darwin," she had said during our first supervised meeting since her release, "I know sorry isn't enough for what I did to you and Tommy. I spent months in jail thinking about how I taught my children to laugh at your pain while you were helping us survive. That's something I have to live with for the rest of my life." Her apology was more honest than anything I had heard from her before, but I remained cautious. Trust broken so completely could not be rebuilt quickly, and Tommy's well-being remained my highest priority. "I appreciate you acknowledging the harm you caused," I had replied, "but words need to be backed up by consistent actions over time. You'll need to prove through your choices that you've really changed." The children were adjusting to their new reality with remarkable resilience. Ashley had officially adopted Jake and Emma, providing them with the stable, honest home they needed to heal from their parents' dysfunction. Both children were excelling in school and had developed close bonds with their new family structure. "Uncle Darwin," Emma said during our weekly family dinner, "I wrote a letter to my teacher about what happened with Mommy and Daddy. She said I was brave for telling the truth, even when it was scary." Jake had channeled his anger into positive activities, becoming passionate about soccer and art. "I'm drawing a picture about families," he announced, showing me a colorful sketch of stick figures holding hands. "This is me and Emma with Ashley, and this is you and Tommy with Jennifer. All the families are different, but everyone tells the truth." The wisdom in his 9-year-old observation struck me deeply. Our family structure had been rebuilt around honesty and genuine care rather than biological obligation or financial manipulation. Tommy's growth had been the most rewarding aspect of our journey. He had developed strong friendships, excelled academically, and most importantly, learned to advocate for himself when situations felt uncomfortable or unfair. "Daddy," he said one afternoon after school, "my friend Marcus was trying to get me to let him copy my homework by saying his mom would be mad if he got a bad grade. I told him that wasn't my responsibility and he needed to talk to his teacher about getting help." Watching my son set healthy boundaries with a manipulative peer showed me that the most important lesson of our ordeal had taken root. Tommy now understood the difference between helping others and being exploited by them. My relationship with Jennifer had deepened into something I had never imagined possible after Lisa's death. Her patient understanding of Tommy's needs, combined with her own emotional maturity and honesty, had created a foundation for healthy love that honored my past while embracing our future. "I never try to replace Tommy's mom," she had explained to a friend who asked about dating a widowed father. "But I can love him as he is and support the family they're building together. That's enough to create something beautiful." Jennifer's approach had allowed Tommy to maintain his connection to Lisa's memory while opening his heart to new relationships. He had Lisa's picture in his room and talked about her regularly, but he also looked forward to the future we were building with Jennifer. The financial recovery had stabilized our lives in ways that went beyond just money. With consistent income that was not being drained by fraudulent emergency requests, I had been able to save for Tommy's education plan for family vacations and even consider purchasing a small house. But more importantly, I had learned to distinguish between generous love and enabling dysfunction. The support group for family fraud victims had taught me warning signs to watch for, and I now helped facilitate meetings for newly affected families. "Your story gives people hope," Detective Williams told me during a recent community presentation. They see that it's possible to break free from family manipulation without losing your compassion or integrity. Speaking publicly about our experience had connected me with hundreds of other people dealing with similar situations. The emails and phone calls I received from victims of family financial abuse confirmed that our story was far from unique, but also showed that recovery and healing were possible. My parents had made significant progress in their own therapy, learning to recognize and interrupt the enabling patterns that had allowed Sarah's behavior to flourish for decades. We're having to relearn how to love our children without accepting abuse from them. My mother Patricia explained during one of our family sessions. It's harder than it sounds because we confuse supporting you with avoiding difficult conversations. Frank had become particularly committed to making amends for his passive role in my exploitation. He had started volunteering with elder services, helping seniors recognize and report financial abuse from family members. I see myself in every elderly person who gets taken advantage of by their own children, he admitted. I enabled Sarah's behavior because confronting it would have been uncomfortable for me. That's not love, that's cowardice. The extended family gatherings now looked completely different. Uncle Robert had become one of my closest allies, and Ashley's adoption of Jake and Emma had created new family bonds based on choice rather than just biology. It's weird how much more peaceful family dinners are now, Ashley observed during our most recent gathering. When Sarah was always creating drama and making demands, everyone walked on eggshells. Now we can actually enjoy each other's company. Grandma Helen, despite her advanced age, had become surprisingly involved in family healing. Her decision to establish trust funds for the grandchildren, rather than leaving everything to Sarah, had been just the beginning of her commitment to breaking generational patterns. I spent too many years ignoring problems to keep peace, she told me during one of our weekly visits. At 79 years old, I finally learned that real peace comes from addressing problems, not avoiding them. The church community that had supported us during our crisis had become genuine friends, rather than just institutional connections. Pastor Michael had implemented new protocols for verifying assistance requests, and several congregation members had shared their own experiences with family manipulation. Your willingness to speak truthfully about what happened helped our entire community become wiser about supporting people in healthy ways, Pastor Michael explained. We've prevented several other cases of fraudulent assistance requests because people now know what warning signs to watch for. But perhaps the most meaningful development was watching Tommy prepare to celebrate a birthday surrounded by people who loved him for who he was not, for what they could gain from our family. "Daddy," he said as we hung streamers for his party, "I'm happy that Aunt Sarah isn't coming to my birthday. Is that bad?" I knelt down to meet his eyes, choosing my words carefully. "It's not bad to feel safe and happy when toxic people aren't around, buddy. You can love someone and still choose not to be hurt by them. That's called having healthy boundaries. Like how Jennifer loves us but doesn't try to control us. Exactly like that, son. Love should make you feel safe and valued, not anxious or guilty." As friends and family arrived for Tommy's birthday celebration, I was struck by the contrast with previous years. Every person in our home was there because they genuinely cared about Tommy's happiness, not because they felt obligated or expected something in return. Jennifer had coordinated with Tommy's teacher to invite his closest school friends. Ashley brought Jake and Emma for a cousin's reunion. My parents arrived with age-appropriate gifts they had chosen thoughtfully, and several church families came to celebrate with us. "This is the best birthday party ever," Tommy announced as he blew out 9 candles on his homemade cake. "Everyone here likes me for real." The innocence and wisdom in his statement captured everything we had fought to achieve. Tommy now lived in a world where relationships were genuine, where adults told the truth even when it was difficult, and where his worth was not determined by other people's needs or agendas. Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and Tommy had fallen asleep, surrounded by his new books and art supplies, Jennifer and I sat on our small balcony watching the sunset. "Are you proud of how you handled everything?" she asked, taking my hand in hers. I thought about her question seriously before answering. I'm proud that I finally learned the difference between love and enabling. I'm proud that Tommy sees adults as protectors rather than people who use him. I'm proud that we broke a cycle of manipulation that could have continued for generations. And Sarah, I hope she continues making progress in therapy. I hope she learns to build genuine relationships with her children based on honesty and respect. But I also know that her healing journey is separate from ours. Jennifer smiled and squeezed my hand. Tommy asked me yesterday if we were going to get married. What did you tell him? I told him that people who love each other like to plan their futures together, and that any decisions we make will include him in conversations that are appropriate for his age. The honest, age-appropriate communication that Jennifer modeled was exactly what Tommy needed to feel secure and valued in our relationships. As we sat in comfortable silence, I reflected on the most important lessons of our journey. I had learned that protecting the people you love sometimes requires making difficult choices that others might not understand. I had learned that grief makes people vulnerable to manipulation, but healing is possible with support and honest self-reflection. Most importantly, I had learned that genuine relationships are built on mutual respect and honesty, not obligation or financial transaction. Thank you, I said to Jennifer as we prepared to go inside. For what? For showing Tommy and me what healthy love looks like. For being patient while we learned to trust again. For choosing our family not because you need something from us, but because you genuinely enjoy being with us. The contrast between Jennifer's authentic affection and Sarah's calculating manipulation was a daily reminder of how much our lives had improved when we stopped accepting poor treatment as the price of belonging. That night, as I tucked Tommy into bed, surrounded by birthday presents from people who truly cared about him, he asked me one final question. Daddy, do you think Aunt Sarah will ever learn to love people without trying to get things from them? I considered his question carefully. I hope so, buddy. People can change if they really want to and work hard at it. But our job is to love people in healthy ways and protect ourselves from those who aren't ready to love us back the same way. Like how you protected me from Aunt Sarah that Christmas. Exactly like that. Sometimes protecting the people you love means standing up to other people you love. As Tommy drifted off to sleep, I realized that the most important gift I could give my son was not material wealth or family connections, but the knowledge that he deserved to be treated with respect and honesty by everyone in his life. The story that began with a 7-year-old child shivering outside in the cold while his family celebrated inside had transformed into something beautiful, a new understanding of what family really means, the courage to demand better treatment, and the wisdom to recognize genuine love when it appears. 1 year later, Tommy was surrounded by people who valued his happiness, protected his innocence, and included him in celebrations because they genuinely enjoyed his presence. The cold, manipulative world Sarah had created had been replaced by warmth, honesty, and authentic connection. Standing in the doorway of Tommy's room, watching him sleep peacefully, surrounded by evidence of genuine affection, I felt the deep satisfaction that comes from making difficult but necessary choices to protect what matters most. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in your own mistreatment, especially when children are watching and learning how relationships should work from your example. By standing up to Sarah's manipulation and exploitation, I had not only protected Tommy from ongoing emotional abuse, but had also shown him that self-respect and defending others are more important than keeping peace with people who cause harm. The lesson that would guide Tommy throughout his life was simple, but powerful. Genuine love protects and nurtures, while toxic behavior uses love as a weapon for manipulation. By learning this difference early, he would be equipped to build healthy relationships and recognize red flags that might otherwise lead to years of exploitation. Our family had been reborn through truth boundaries and genuine care. The future stretched ahead of us bright with possibility built on a foundation of honesty that would weather any storm. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and protecting someone you love? Sometimes the people closest to us can cause the deepest harm, and standing up to them requires more courage than facing strangers. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how families can support each other without enabling harmful behavior. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and share it with others who might need to hear that it's okay to set boundaries with toxic family members. Subscribe for more stories about standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Your support helps me continue sharing these important messages about protecting ourselves and the people we love. Thank you for listening to our journey from manipulation to healing. Remember that you deserve relationships built on mutual respect and genuine care, not obligation or guilt. Until next time, keep protecting what matters most, and never apologize for refusing to accept poor treatment from anyone, regardless of their relationship to you.